There was once a king who ruled over a quiet land of rivers and stone walls, where mornings arrived gently and the evenings seemed to linger. From a distance, his life looked complete. He had power, respect, and a throne carved from the strongest wood in the kingdom. People bowed when he passed. They lowered their eyes. They called him wise. And yet, something unsettled him. It began as a small feeling, almost too small to notice. A faint weight in his chest whenever he spoke for too long. A strange emptiness after he explained himself. He would give careful answers, thoughtful reasons, patient explanations. And still, when he looked into their faces, he would see doubt, or confusion, or quiet resistance. He told himself it was nothing. After all, a king must speak. A king must guide. A king must correct misunderstandings. That is what he believed. But the more he spoke, the more tired he became. Have you ever felt that? The heaviness that comes not from work, but from explaining who you are. From trying to make others understand what feels clear inside you. The king began to notice a pattern. When whispers rose in the court, he would answer them directly. When someone questioned his choice, he would explain every reason behind it. When rumors spread, he would address them openly, hoping that truth would settle the noise. Yet the noise never truly settled. It only changed shape. At night, when the palace grew quiet and the torches burned low, he would sit alone. No guards, no advisors, just the sound of wind against stone. In those moments, he would ask himself a question he had never dared to ask before. Why do I feel smaller after I defend myself? It confused him. He was the king. His authority did not come from their approval. And yet, each time he tried to convince them, something inside him felt diminished, as if he had stepped down from his throne. Not physically, but inwardly. He began to observe more carefully. He noticed how quickly his heart moved when someone challenged him. How his breath shortened. How his thoughts rushed forward, searching for the perfect response. It all happened so fast. A single comment, and already his mind was building a defense. Why? Was it fear of being misunderstood? Fear of losing respect? Or something deeper? A quiet need to be seen as right. The realization was not loud. It did not strike him like thunder. It arrived softly, like dawn creeping into a dark room. He understood that he had been speaking not from strength, but from discomfort. Each explanation had been an attempt to ease his own unease. Each defense had been a way to quiet the sting of doubt. He had believed he was protecting his authority, but perhaps he had been protecting his pride. This thought unsettled him. He had always believed that power meant having the right words at the right time. That leadership meant answering every question. That silence meant weakness. But now, sitting in the stillness of the night, he wondered something different. What if silence was not weakness? What if it was space? He began to see that not every whisper required his voice. Not every misunderstanding required correction. Some things, when left alone, faded on their own, and some doubts revealed more about them than about him. He did not change overnight. The habit of speaking quickly was strong. The urge to clarify still rose within him. But now, he noticed it. He felt it before acting. And in that small space between feeling and reaction, there was something new. A choice. For the first time, the king saw that true authority might not be found in how much he spoke, but in what he could leave unsaid. And in that quiet discovery, something inside him grew still. After that quiet realization, the king did not suddenly become different. The court still gathered each morning. The same faces stood before him. The same whispers moved like wind through tall grass. Nothing outside had changed. But something inside him had begun to shift. The first time they tested his silence, it was small. A voice rose from the far end of the hall, questioning one of his decisions. It was not loud, but it was sharp. The kind of question meant to invite doubt. The king felt the familiar tightening in his chest. The quick spark of heat behind his ribs. His thoughts began to form their defense, lining up reasons, explanations, careful words. He almost spoke. Then he paused. Just for a moment. In that small pause, he noticed something he had never truly seen before. The discomfort was real, but it was passing. Like a wave that rises high and then falls on its own. He realized he did not have to chase it away with words. He could simply let it move through him. So he remained still. The hall waited. They expected a long explanation, as they had always received. They expected him to protect his decision with logic and authority. But instead, he looked calmly at the one who had spoken and then moved on. The silence felt heavy at first, almost unbearable. His heart beat louder in his ears. He wondered, have I appeared weak? Have I given them reason to doubt me? But something unexpected happened. The question faded on its own. Without his resistance, it had nothing to push against. Without his energy, it had no fire to grow from. The moment passed, and the court continued. That evening, he sat alone again in the quiet of his chamber. He replayed the moment in his mind. He noticed that although the discomfort had been strong, it had not destroyed him. No crown had fallen from his head. No power had slipped from his hands. Only the urge to react had faded. Days passed, and tests grew bolder. They whispered louder now. They exchanged glances. Some spoke with hidden challenge in their tone. It was as if they were waiting for him to return to his old pattern. To defend, to argue, to prove. Each time, the pull to react was there. It rose quickly, like a flame catching dry wood. He could feel the words gathering at the edge of his lips. He could feel his pride asking to be protected. But he had begun to see something clearly. Reaction gave them access to his inner state. When he defended himself, he revealed where he felt uncertain. When he argued, He showed where he felt threatened. And when he rushed to correct them, he handed them the power to disturb him again. Was that true authority, or was it dependence disguised as strength? So he practiced stillness, not a cold silence, not a distant silence, but a steady one. He listened. He allowed them to speak. He let their doubts hang in the air without chasing them away. And in doing so, he noticed a quiet shift in the room. Some grew uncomfortable. Some grew confused. A few even softened. Because without his reaction, they were left alone with their own words. He began to understand that silence was not emptiness. It was presence. It required control of the inner storm. It required patience with his own rising emotions. There were nights when he questioned himself. Nights when he wondered if he should have spoken more, explained more, defended more. But each morning, when he entered the hall with calm eyes and steady breath, he felt something new. He was no longer ruled by the need to be understood. He was observing rather than reacting. And in that observation, a quiet strength was forming, not loud, not visible, but deeply rooted. They could test him. They could question him. They could whisper. But they could no longer reach the place inside him that once trembled at every doubt. And slowly, without announcement, the king began to feel untouchable. Not because they feared him, but because he had learned to master the space between feeling and response. In that space, he was free. With time, his silence was no longer an effort. In the beginning, it had felt like holding back a rushing river. It required awareness. It required restraint. Each pause had been deliberate. Each unspoken word had carried weight. But slowly, the river grew calm on its own. The king no longer entered the hall preparing to defend himself. He no longer scanned faces for approval or signs of agreement. He simply arrived, present, steady, enough within himself. They still spoke, of course. Voices still rose with questions. Doubts still floated through the air like dust caught in sunlight. But something had changed in the way those words met him. They no longer struck his chest like arrows. They touched him lightly and fell away. He had discovered a quiet habit. He listened fully. He allowed others to finish their thoughts. And before any response formed, he asked himself one simple question. Is this worth my peace? Often, the answer was silence. Not because he had nothing to say. Not because he feared their opinions. But because he understood something deeper now. Not every challenge deserves energy. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Some things reveal themselves over time. Some truths stand without defense. He had once believed that authority came from controlling the room. Now he saw that true authority came from controlling himself. There is a difference. When a person reacts quickly, they are pulled by invisible strings. A single word can move them. A single glance can disturb them. Their mood becomes tied to the behavior of others. But when a person chooses stillness, those strings begin to fall away. The king noticed that the more he preserved his inner calm, the more naturally others adjusted around him. Conversations grew softer. Questions became more thoughtful. The sharp edges in the room slowly dulled. It was not fear that changed them. It was his steadiness. They could no longer predict his reactions. They could no longer provoke the fire they once enjoyed stirring. Without conflict, there was nothing to feed. And in that quiet space, respect began to grow. Not forced, not demanded, but earned through presence.